Thank you. And Diane, you began this morning by commenting on the scale of media interest in this story, and I think it's fair to say, and certainly my experience, that we've probably not had a communications event quite like this. Certainly I can't remember an occasion when so many people have been directly affected by a single event. Companies are bought and sold, investigated for wrongdoing, market inquiries are launched, but none of these events has anywhere near the same reach as gender pay gap reporting, because every employee of the thousands of companies that have reported has a stake in gender pay gap reporting, and so too do their families. And as importantly, so too do the journalists and the commentators that have written so extensively about this. It's a difficult story to be objective and impersonal about. And we talked before about how it's got people talking, and when we look at the analysis not only of press coverage of a gender pay gap in traditional media, but across social media, predominantly platforms like Twitter, it's very evident that this has been a really significant story. In fact, of all the business stories of this year, it's the most talked about, more so than Martin Sorrell losing his job at WPP, or the Carillion scandal, or Sainsbury's and Asda's merger. There is no other business story that has attracted as much attention as the gender pay gap. And when we look more generally at stories in popular culture, you have to look for a royal wedding to find a story that's been quite so talked about. Mostly, the conversation has been uncomfortable. Of course, none of us would have expected companies to report anything other than the fact that in the main, men are paid more than women, but the scale has perhaps been more extreme than we would have expected. When a company celebrates a pay gap of 30%, when they sell that to us as a positive, it's clear that we've got a major problem. And the reaction of external stakeholders has been entirely predictable. The criticism of organizations has been harsh, and as I think the points that I just made about the volume of conversation, it's been as loud as anybody in the communications industry predicted. We talked about the power of shaming, and undoubtedly the laggards have been called out and they have been shamed. And to their credit, most have not sought to deflect criticism, but have acknowledged their failings and have made big promises for change. And for many, big promises are necessary. And it's those big promises that we'll judge them on in 12 months' time. From the start, criticism of the gender pay gap was that it would present a distorted view of equalities in companies. If the data is shonky, critics argued, it won't have the effect publishing it is intended to have, but that definitely hasn't been the case. The laggards, the boys' clubs that have talked a good game on gender diversity, but perhaps not much more, have made big commitments to change. The early signs are, from conversations that I've had with employers, that the gender pay gap is having a positive effect. The shaming of companies, action on gender equality is taking place as a consequence. What now? The temptation for many companies will be to see gender pay gap reporting as an annual event, something to be managed with a view to minimizing reputational damage. The approach will be, well, we know we're going to take a hit, but let's try to find a place in the middle of a pack. Let's try to be as discreet and out of view as possible. But I don't think that's the approach that many will take, certainly not in my experience. In 2019, and I think in years to come, the traditional media will go to town on data. They will continue to shame those with big numbers, Most importantly, they'll continue to shame, or they will start to shame rather, those not making progress. And it's unlikely, I think, that we'll go back to business as usual. Why not? I think for one reason above all others, and that is employees won't like it. My experience of talking to employees in organizations is that there is real activism on the shop floor. Employees are talking about it, they're demanding change, and businesses are listening. I'm fortunate to work for an employer that boasts of a negative gender pay gap, although Jana tells me that's nothing to boast about. We should be looking for zero. Both on mean and median scores, women are paid more than men. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that the impact on retention and recruitment of women of people more generally rather, not just women, has been profound. For employers now, I think the imperative is to keep lines of communication open, to listen attentively to what your employers are saying and to show them that you're acting upon it. It's also imperative that leaders of organizations take a campaigning position on gender equality. For all the reasons that Sam talked about, there is a clear business rationale for doing it. It's not just for societal benefit, but it's also for organizations to be more profitable. My final thing I want to talk about is how I think the narrative will change. The narrative to date has been, what are your numbers? The narrative in future years will be progress. So the imperative for organizations is to demonstrate progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good timing.